In this video, you're going to learn how to do the purl stitch. The purl stitch is one of two stitches used in knitting, the other being the knit stitch, which we learned in a previous video. With the purl stitch, you're going to hold your needles the same way you would as if you were doing the knit stitch. So the needle with all of the stitches on it is going to be in my left hand. The needle that's empty is in my right hand. Now I cast on 10 stitches here using the long tail cast on. If you're not sure how to do this technique, you can watch it in my previous video, the long tail cast on. So if you think back to when we learned how to do the knit stitch, we held our working yarn, which is the yarn that comes off of the ball, to the back of our stitches. And with our empty needle, we came in from the front to the back. The purl stitch, you're going to do the exact opposite. So with the purl stitch, we're holding our working yarn to the front of our work, and we're going to come in through the loop from the back to the front. Okay, now when I do the purl stitch, I tension my yarn similarly to how I did the knit stitch. So I go around my pinky, I go over top of my first finger, but for the purl stitch I also go over my thumb. Okay, so remember, you're going to come in from the back to the front. You're going to go over top of that needle, okay, and you're going to pull that stitch through the loop and then off of your left hand needle onto your right. Okay, so back to front, up and over, through and off. Back to front, up and over, through and off. Now you notice I'm tensioning this yarn with my thumb. When you do continental knitting, you have a tendency to do your purl stitches too loose, your knit stitches too tight. And that causes an uneven fabric. So to correct that, what you should do is tighten up a little bit on your purl stitch. I'm doing that by tensioning the yarn with my thumb. And then you're going to loosen up your knit stitch. Okay, so remember, from back to front, over top, and through. 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 Okay, and remember, when we get to the end of a row, we take the needle that has all of the stitches and put it back in our left hand, okay, and in our right hand we have the empty needle. Okay, so remember, we start with our yarn in front. We come in from the back of the stitch to the front, over top, and through. Back to front, over top, through. Back to front, over top, and through. Back to front, over top, and through, all the way to the end of our row. So with knitting, you use a combination of knit and purl stitches to get different types of stitch patterns. The two most common stitch patterns that you'll be using are stockinette and garter. And I'm going to show you what those look like. Okay, so this is stockinette stitch. You can see that the stitches lay flat. Okay, and we see here a bunch of little tiny V's, okay, in our knitting. The stockinette stitch is created by doing one row knit, one row purl, back and forth. Excuse me. If we turn our work over, this is the wrong side of the fabric, and you can see here all of these little bumps. The bumps are purl stitches. That's what a purl stitch looks like. These flat stitches, these are knit stitches, this V. Okay, so this was stockinette. Remember, it's created by doing one row knit, one row purl, back and forth. This is garter stitch. Can you notice we have a row of raised stitches and then a ditch, row of raised stitches, the ditch. Okay, the raised stitches, these are purl stitches, okay, and again, it's like a bump. And then in between these rows of purl stitches, we have a knit stitch, and that's that V. This is created by doing every row knit or every row purl. But of course, every row knit is easier than every row purl. Okay. All right, so back to the purl stitch. Remember, we have our working yarn in front, front to back, over top and through, front to back, over top and through. And that's the purl stitch.